So let's go into these 7 principles, and I think certainly having a belief system to lean on something greater than yourself certainly helps you to do it scared. Principle number 1, dare to think big. And I can't think bigger than both you starting your blog, which you did on what you say is on a whim, but the crazy, hairy, fat, big goal that you set when you started this.
Yes. So my big goal when I started, and maybe not the first day, but within the first couple of weeks of starting my blog, I saw that there were people out there making money on the internet, and I decided I was going to do that too. And I went to my husband and said, I am going to make enough money blogging that you can quit your job. And that was it. From then on, that was the first really the first time in my life that I had set a goal so big that I didn't know how I was going to achieve it. I had no idea. It seemed crazy to me. And my husband told me it was crazy. In fact, he told me it was the stupidest thing I had ever said.
Oh, has he eaten some crow? Sorry, crows.
Well, oh yeah, he totally has. And I mean, he has to hear me tell that story, but he's just that he was not being mean. He's just like very matter of fact. And he's like, that's not possible. And so it really felt like this completely crazy idea that I had no idea how I was going to make it happen. And yet I was so determined to make it happen that I was willing to do whatever it took.
What is the importance for us of having a stretch goal, of having something so big?
The thing is, the research shows, and there's some great research by Charles Duhigg on this subject, but the research shows that it's stretch goals are the thing that motivate us. It's not enough to just set goals that feel attainable and achievable. Because those are never the things that get us fired up or that light that fire in our belly. But when we set big goals, goals that do feel a little bit crazy, that do feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I could even achieve this. Mm-hmm. It sparks the good kind of fear inside of us, the fear that motivates us to work a little harder, to get up and push ourselves a little bit more. And it also gives us a roadmap to follow that will then tell us what direction we should be moving in. So many times people feel like they are stuck and not making any progress. And a lot of times it's because they don't have any direction to go. So if you don't have a direction don't have something that you're aiming for, you're always going to feel stuck. You're never going to feel like you're making progress because the day-to-day busyness of life will always take over.
In the first part of your book, you talk about the different archetypes when it comes to fear. There is, in most of us, there is a stopping mechanism where if the dream is too big, it seems impossible, then I won't step forward at all. Was it the rebel in you, or what's the piece that we need to know so that we step forward? We set this huge goal and we go, all right, I know I'm thinking the term baby steps is coming to my mind. I know I've got Everest out there. How do I, hit the eject here and get into motion?
Well, that's where I think it's not enough to have the big goal. And I talk about that a little bit more in part 3 of the book about how to actually turn your big goal into taking action. And so, but first you have to give yourself permission to think big. And that's where it's a principle of courage, because so many of us, so often we self-edit before we even give ourselves the chance to dream. We are so concerned about the how, and we allow the fact that we don't know how we're going to do things dictate what we even allow ourselves to dream about. We just immediately have that little voice that says, no, you could never do that, or you don't even know how you do that, or who are you to think that you could do that, or no way, you would screw that up, or and there's, like you referred to the fear archetypes, there's these 7 different fear archetypes, or ways that fear manifests itself in our lives and holds us back and keeps us stuck. So for everybody, depending on what your fear archetype is, that voice that's holding you back from thinking big is a little bit different. And it's really a matter of starting with giving yourself that permission to think bigger about your life and about your goals and dreams and about what you really want to do, because that's the starting point of creating a life that you love, is actually identifying what that looks like.
Beautiful. And then you have to give yourself permission. And this must have been a challenge for you because you were a perfectionist. I was a perfectionist. To give ourselves permission to fail, to screw up, to be messy. No mud, no lotus, but go it as best you can without judgment.
Yes. Well, and that's also one of the principles of courage, is that is understanding that there are no mistakes, only lessons. And so that's why, like, again, like whatever your fear archetype is and whatever those internal messages that have been happening are, that you first need to identify those and know what fear looks like for you. Because what's really interesting is that each of us experiences fear in our own unique way. But because so much of that fear happens subconsciously, we don't recognize it necessarily even as fear. Sometimes we just recognize it as truth. And so it's sort of like when you go to the doctor and you say, "Doctor, I don't feel good." And that could be anything. The first thing the doctor has to do is diagnose you. And that's why part 1 of the book with the fear archetypes is so essential, because once you understand how fear is manifesting itself in your life, that's when you know how to start to combat those messages.
I like that. And one of the ways we can combat that's with many of these different archetypes is you say action is the antidote for fear. And I like to say fear and anxiety are really excitement without deliberate, focused motion once we get in motion.
So true. So true. That's a really good way of putting it.
So let's go from there. Let's go to principle number 2. I love this one. I thought of making the whole interview on this. Rules are for suckers.
Yes. Well, I feel like I've probably lived that one out, because I am not a rule follower.
Yeah.
And that one being a rule follower has not been a fear archetype that has held me back. But the rule follower archetype is actually the second most common archetype out there. So I know that it's a huge struggle for so many people, this fear of coloring outside the lines, this fear that there's somebody out there, some sort of authority figure who's going to crack down on you if you do it wrong. And especially when you're thinking about going after big goals and big dreams in your life, that fear that you might get it wrong or break a rule along the way can be so paralyzing for people that they don't take any action at all.
So let's go from there to principle, and it's actually interesting. You have to stretch. You have to. We're not talking about doing things illegal or anything even close, but you have to feel, ooh, is this a good, safe thing to do a little bit, to know you're on track, and that's maybe the direction you get to go in.
Yes. Yeah, that's super true. Like that's exactly where doing it scared comes in. It's feeling the fear and then doing it anyway.
Principle number 3 by my count, always own it.
Yes, such a big one. And this is really just a matter of taking full responsibility for your life and adopting a no excuses mentality of saying it doesn't matter who has hurt me, what has happened in my life, if people have let me down, whatever my circumstances are, because we all have hard circumstances. We all have things that we are outside of our control, but it's taking 100% ownership, complete and total ownership for your life and for the choices that you make. So powerful.
What does it mean to let go of the victim card? And you talk about 3 amazing women, Oprah, J.K. Rowling, Bethany Hamilton, surfing with one arm. What's it mean to let go of the victim card?
Well, the thing is, like, when you've had something hard happen to you, when you've had hardship in your life, whether you've grown up in poverty, whether you're a minority, whether you are, have had some sort of trauma or tragedy or something difficult in your life, people will hand you the victim card. They will say, it's okay. It's okay. It's not your fault. You've had so many hardships in your life. They will give you that card.
The disempowerment card.
Yes, society is glad to hand you that card, and where you get to raise your hand and say, it's not my fault. It's not my fault that my life is terrible because all of these horrible things have happened to me. But that does not serve you. That victim card does not serve you. It is not going to help you get to where you want to be. It is not going to do anything for you except alleviate your feeling of being responsible for yourself, which ultimately is the worst thing that you can do. Because if you allow yourself to stay stuck in that victim role, even if you have had bad things happen to you, in the end, what good is that to you? Then you're still stuck. You're still a victim, and you'll never get to where you want to be. And I just love that there's so many examples that we can look to people who have had every excuse in the book and have chosen to say, I'm not going to let this defeat me. Bethany Hamilton is a great example of that. I use that in the book. Like, she had her arm bit off by a shark because she could have said, I'm never going to surf again. And nobody would have blamed her for that. In fact, her family thought she was kind of crazy for even attempting it again, but she went out and became a surfing champion, not just like in the Special Olympics surfing champion, but an actual champion in the like competing against people with two arms. And that's kind of the mentality that you have to take.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's go to principle number 4, embracing honest feedback. And we've been on a kick lately of hiring a YouTube expert, hiring a iTunes or podcast expert and saying, give it to me straight. I know my ego might be a little bit ruffled in the feathers, but I need the honest feedback.
Yes, honest feedback is so, so hard to actually embrace. I mean, because we sometimes say we want feedback, but what we really want is for people to stroke our ego and people to tell us that we're wonderful and people to tell us that they agree with us. And we tend to surround ourselves with people who agree with us. We want to have people who think the way that we do, that have the same political views that we do, that have the same belief structures that we do. And it's really hard to step out of that and go, okay, I might feel more comfortable when having people agree with me, but it's not going to serve me and it's not going to push me to be better. And if you can get to a point in your life where you surround yourself with truth tellers, people who are on the one hand, your biggest cheerleaders and the ones who will be there for you no matter what, but on the other hand, who will give it to you brutally straight and tell you the hard things that nobody else will and tell you what you need to hear, that is the most amazing thing that you can do for yourself, because those are the people that will push you to be better and not allow you to stay stuck in your own stuff and especially in your own fears. And that's huge when it comes to overcoming fear, because they're the ones that will call you out when you're making those excuses and you're allowing those things to get in your way.
I love it. And we all have blind spots. You talk about a little conflict and controversy being even necessary, encouraging it in your loving workplace. But I think what it does is when you bring up controversy, what you bring up is blind spots to the conscious mind that the unconscious mind knows about, but is unwilling to examine.
Oh, that's a really good way of putting it.
So let's go from there. Principle number 5. Really, you've covered a lot of this, but there are no mistakes, only lessons.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And I mean, we've gone through a lot of my own personal mistakes in my life, and that's kind of what I do in that chapter. Yeah. But that's what I go through in that chapter. But I also talk about how some of my biggest mistakes have led to the best pieces of my life, like I, going to Holland, and it was the best year of my life. Not getting my college degree, like it ended up, or not getting my high school degree. I went to that year in college. I ended up getting 16 college credits for that year in the Dutch language, because I learned how to speak fluent Dutch. Even though I didn't, yeah, veel goed. Even though I didn't get a college or a high school diploma. So, like there are always things. I talk about how I dated the wrong people. I got divorced and then went on this like massive dating spree of like dated everybody. I feel like everybody for a while. And then I finally fell really hard for this guy that I thought was like the one for me. And I was so in love with him, and it was just like, but he was also very non-committal to me. So it was like one of those situations where I was throwing myself at him and he was kind of just like, yeah, I kind of like you. And dated him for 9 months, completely broke my heart. And right after that, I then immediately fell for this guy who was just like the biggest sleazeball, he said all the right things, did all the right things, was the CEO of a company, and I was so impressive and swept me off my feet, and only to find out that he was completely sleazy, dating all these other girls on the side, but as it turns out, dating him is how I met my husband, the guy who is now my husband. And so dating Mr. Wrong led me to Mr. Right, and that was just one example of how sometimes your biggest mistakes end up leading you to the right place.
Woohoo! So, in a lot of this section, you've been talking about reframing. And so you've been explaining how these are positives, but you also talk about, maybe we go real briefly because we got to whip through this, a historic log cabin in eastern Tennessee that has not resurfaced. And what's a fate
Yes.
worse than failure?
Oh, it's the regret. It's the regret. And I will say, like, we did this huge research study for this book. We surveyed more than 4,000 people
Mhm.
about the role of fear in their lives. And the stories that we got, the most heartbreaking of all the stories were the stories of regret, the stories of people who let fear hold them back from doing something. And even though if they were talking about something 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, the pain of that regret was still so fresh as if it had just happened. Can you imagine living 50 years wishing that you had done something? And that's what I think was so striking to me is that the pain of failure is never, it only lasts for a little while. It's temporary. It only lasts for a very short time. But the pain of regret, that can linger with you forever.
The
And I
what
will say, like,
ifs.
the what ifs. And I don't have actually a lot of regrets in my life, which I'm really thankful for. I've made tons of mistakes, but that pain has not stayed with me. But the one real regret, and I talk about this, is a few years ago, we found this amazing historic log cabin in eastern Tennessee, and we came so close to buying it. We had, we flew up there. We had a contractor come in. We made an offer, but we sort of lowballed the offer, and they wouldn't come down, and we wouldn't come up. My husband didn't want to go any higher, and because then the realtor had told us, like, any house in this county, you don't want to go over, I think it was at that point, it was like over $300,000. It's not a good investment if you're spending any more than $300,000 because this county is not like, that's the cap of the like best house in this entire county. And so we had found out like it was going to be about $150,000 in repairs to do what we wanted to do. And so we put the offer in, but they said no, and we had to walk away. And oh, like even now, it still kills me. We go on Zillow all the time and check to see if our cabin has ever come back on the market, but so far it hasn't.
Stay tuned.
Someday, I still believe we'll get it
I
someday.
like it. And just the way we've ended up where we've ended up, it's entirely, probably more than possible, but likely. If it's meant to be, it's coming around for you.
That's right.
Principle number 6, balance is overrated.
Yes. And I think that this one is especially tough. I mean, I think it's tough for everybody, but especially for women. That's what I've found is that we put so much pressure on ourselves to be completely balanced in all areas of our life, like work-life balance. There's all this, buzz phrase that comes about it. And somehow we're supposed to be super moms and super employees and super everything. And, but I think that happens for everybody. But what I really think is that we're not called to balance. I think that we are called to purpose. And if you
Can I pause you? Can you
yeah,
repeat that one time? That is so huge.
we are not called to balance. We are called to purpose. And by that, I mean that it's not about being perfectly balanced in every area of your life, because all that really means is being perfectly balanced in mediocrity. And when you can really lean into the things that are most important in your life, that's where you're going to find the most fulfillment. That's where you're going to find your purpose. And that's ultimately where you're going to find the most joy. Give yourself permission to not be good at some stuff or to do a few things half-assed. It's okay to not be balanced.
Woohoo! Let's go to principle number 7. Just keep going. And mornings and your poor daughter, Maggie.
I know, my poor daughter, Maggie. Well, the idea of to just keep going is to just take one step and then the next step, and whatever happens, just don't quit. So many people quit right before they strike gold. That's the thing. Like if you can just keep going no matter what. And I share a story in the book about my poor daughter Maggie, and she has to put up with my other daughter Annie in the mornings. And Maggie is like the quintessential oldest child. She's always ready on time, and she's just organized and her room is clean and she does all her things, checks it all off. And every morning
You
I tell
tell
a few
her that
stories.
she can only control, and I'm getting
Yes.
ahead of the story. So
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. So then my younger daughter Annie is just chaos generator. Like that's pretty much her story in her life. It's chaos everywhere she goes, and she has no concern for time. She has no concern for her sister. She walks around holding a shoe, pretending like she's cleaning up, and Maggie wants to be to school on time, and Annie doesn't care if she's to school on time, and they have to go at the same time. So even if Maggie's ready, she ends up waiting for Annie, and she gets so frustrated every single day. And then that ends up ruining her whole day because she's just mad. And that's where continually I have to tell her, you don't get to control other people. You don't get to control what your sister does. The only thing in your life that you can control, no matter what, is yourself. You control how your day is. You can choose to let this ruin your day, or you can choose to go to school and shake it off and have a great day. Because at the end of the day, there's always going to be things no matter what. I mean, that goes back to the victim, letting go of the victim card. There's always going to be things in your life that are outside of your control, or that aren't fair, or that are hard or stressful or frustrating. But you get to choose how you respond.
awesome. What do you mean make courage a daily decision?
You know, it's something that we choose every single day. That you wake up and you decide, I am going to make the choice to do it scared. I'm going to make the choice to not let my circumstances dictate who I become. I'm going to make the choice to own it. I'm going to make that choice every single day. And you choose and you keep choosing over and over again.
Woohoo! Where can people go to find your beautiful book and to find out more?
Oh, thank you. You can find everything at doitscared.com. And I know we didn't have a chance to talk a lot about the archetypes, but we actually have an assessment there that will help you dive into exactly what your fear archetype is. And so that's all at doitscared.com.
Excellent. If you didn't catch doitscared.com, come on over to inspirenationshow.com. We'll get you over to doitscared.com. Any last words of wisdom you want to share with people, Ruth?
You know, the final thing that I just want to say is that action really is the antidote to fear. So if you can take one little step, and then that'll give you the courage to take the next little step, and that'll give you the courage to take the next one, and you just keep going no matter what, you're going to get there eventually.
Woohoo! Thank you so much, Ruth, and thank you for sharing your story today. That was huge for people.
You're welcome. Well, thank you again for having me back. It was so good to be here. All right. Thanks, Michael.
Everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, do it scared, and begin stepping forward today and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, Ruth.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!